And it's generating anxiety, and they're losing information, and they can't find stuff. And where did we make that decision? And that decision cost us like $37K because we forgot, we missed the deadline. It wasn't a thread, and we didn't see it in the channel.
That was one of the moments that pushed Lecat to rethink how modern teams communicate. He learned product at companies such as Asana, built and scaled the product team at Algolia, and for the past years, he's been building the product of his own called Upstream.
And for decades and decades, people have said email is going to go away and die. But like, no, it's the protocol for business communication. Yes, we're building an email client, but the vision behind it is much bigger. It's not just like, oh, I want a fancier version of Gmail. You know, it's like, how do we actually help people collaborate together more efficiently? And email is the wedge that allows us to get distribution at scale.
Louis doesn't think communication at work is broken because people send messages. He thinks it's broken because we accepted tools that create noise, anxiety, and lost context.
Sort of like a design principle that we have is that the AI should always be working for you.
And that's why Louis is relevant right now. This isn't just a conversation about inboxes. It's a conversation about what AI products should actually do. Reduce friction, preserve control, and help humans focus on high-value work instead of drowning in noise.
Whoever thinks, you know, like the interface, the inbox is going to go away is like completely crazy, right?
In this episode, we talk about changing the way we work, communicating with more clarity, and using AI in a smart, practical way. Welcome to The French Product. Here is Louis Lecat, founder of Upstream. Louis, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. I wanted to start with a little bit of your journey because you've been working with some pretty iconic product teams. So Algolia and Asana. Just to introduce a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what were the big lessons before you built Upstream that you carried forward in founding Upstream.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So my journey, maybe to introduce myself quickly, grew up in France, left for the US right after college, pretty much. Spent a year in New York, spent the rest of about 10 years in the Bay Area in San Francisco, went to Stanford. That's how I found tech. And then I landed in product by chance. I was more of an engineer by training, like a lot of French people. And then quickly transitioned to being a PM at a very small startup that was, I think, about 5 people when I joined it. And we raised a Series A with Sequoia, and Sequoia was like, you need PMs. And we were like, what's a PM? And so it's like everybody pointed at me. And that's sort of like how I learned the ropes of it, right? And really sort of just fell in love with the job. And it was like, this is the only thing in the world that I can think of doing with my career. So I did that at that company for a couple of years. We went through Series A, B, C, grew to, you know, maybe about 150 people. And then I joined Asana, which maybe is the place where I learned the most in terms of product, or at least in terms of really like best practices. I had an incredible boss over there that taught me a lot of the fundamentals that I know and sort of like how to operate from first principles as a PM. And then joined Algolia after that as their VP of product and led the product team over there and sort of like learned sort of like a new skill in the PM career, which is more like how you build a team, how you scale it, how you create consistency within that team and sort of like across in the company. So that's sort of like, that was my journey from about 5 people company to about maybe 600 when I left Algolia, and I saw all the stages in between. And then after that, basically decided I hadn't done the 0 to 5 motion. And so that's what I've been doing with Upstream. So that's sort of like what took me to where I am. Awesome.
And so I know that most founders are told to, ship fast and break things. You and Jonathan, which is your CTO and co-founder, you did the opposite. You build a little bit in stealth for nearly 2 years, I think. And then like, why did you, let's say, break the rule of like the lean startup?
So for context, so we're building Upstream, and Upstream is an email client, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it. But an email client is like, we are rebuilding everything in Gmail and more. And so when you think about the lean startup, you think MVP, it's like, okay, you need a minimum viable product and the way you drive it is you have a hypothesis and your MVP is what helps you test the hypothesis, right? And you want something that's really minimal to get signal on the hypothesis. And so we started 2 years ago. We went through YC early on. That's sort of like what kicked us off. And the intention for us, like we never veered away from sort of like the lean startup principle and the MVP principle. It's more that your MVP is different depending on what you build.
Yeah.
So what is minimal for us is very different from, another company, right? A lot of maybe SaaS products from a tech perspective are almost like, it's like a front end and a database behind it, and they communicate, and you can build something. You can build an MVP in a week, right? But there are some products that just, to help you validate the hypothesis, to actually get users, you need to build a lot more than that. And so for something like Gmail, if I'm asking you to sort of like, okay, you should give it on Gmail and use my product.
Yeah.
If I give you something that just like displays your inbox, but you can't get into the messages and you can't reply to them, you're going to be like, okay, I like the concept, but like call me back once I can do that, right?
Yeah.
With all the things, with like, I can't star my emails and it doesn't save my drafts and I want to be able to snooze and all of that. And so, yes, you can get signal from, showing like a 10% version of your product, 15% and all that. But to validate the idea, you actually need to get users, right? So the MVP is bigger. Now, that being said, I wouldn't say we've been in stealth for 2 years, right? Because I know for a fact, and I know from experience, from past failures, that if I build something and I don't give it to people and I don't show it to people, it's just going to fail.
Yeah.
So if I went if I went 2 years into a tunnel and be like, here's my product, please use it. And I would for sure realize that nobody needs it, or it's not built the right way or something, right? So we're in a closed beta, which means it's not publicly accessible, but we actually have a lot of people using it within the closed beta, right? And the drive was always to get people to use, a slice of the product ASAP, right? So even in closed beta, even in the first few months, was like, how do we onboard people? Who can we find who's crazy enough, who's like an early adopter for us to actually start using it, right?
Me.
Yeah, we found you recently. Yeah, definitely. But it's always been, and it's always been the mindset and always growing in the closed beta. It's just we haven't, I guess, from a PR/marketing perspective, haven't really announced to the world that we exist. You can find us if you look, if you know where to look, right? It's just that that's not the thing that has been the focus so far.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And so going through YC that you mentioned, they usually push for immediate growth, if I'm not mistaken, from the people I've talked to. So
yeah, absolutely.
Like what happened there? Did they think like you were crazy for focusing on craft before the metrics? Because it makes sense what you say. Like your goal eventually is to have people churn from things that they're very used to. Everyone has an email address and gets emails. So you need to get them to churn from their, standard solution. So for that, like how did YC react?
Yeah. So the way YC is structured is you really work one-on-one with your partner, right? And your partner really builds context about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you really build a relationship with them. And so I think it's two ways. YC is really, the mantra is really like just launch as fast as possible, get growth. And like, if you don't get growth, pivot. It's kind of like the thing, right? But they also know, and for, I'd say, 80% of startups or like a lot of products where like you can really start to get traction, even sometimes before building product, right? You can sell stuff. And once you've sold it, you can build it. That works. But YC also does a lot of companies that don't work like that. There's like the company, I think it's called Boom, like the supersonic jets.
Yeah.
They're making supersonic airplanes, And for them,
you can't do an MVP for that. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, you can. You do like prototypes and you go through different milestones of like, we're going to raise enough money that we're going to have a first miniature version of it flying and get different milestones so that we can raise more money and like prove traction and LOIs from big companies. So it's just like a different way of building for them, right? And I wasn't in their batch, but I'm pretty sure their partner wasn't like, where's your first,
True.
When's your first flight? Just like, I don't have a plane,
True.
So for us, the discussions were like twofold. One is they really, our partner, who's amazing, Aaron Epstein, amazing person to work with, really challenged us to go get users even before we felt we were ready. So we actually got our first users during YC, and a lot thanks for them pushing for it. It's like you can find, like the first conversation was like, find me just one person to use your stuff, right? It's like, it's not ready. It's like, no, like actually, like you spend 2 weeks, you actually come back. It's like, I found 5 people, and then it's like, okay, find me 10, and then you go back. That's sort of like so it's still helpful. Even though you can't launch something and say like, everybody switch please from Gmail at this point, right? But you're able to find some crazy people to, start using your stuff, start testing your stuff. And then I work backwards with you in terms of like, okay, if you have a longer build, what does it look like? What does it take? Do you want to raise money? How much? What kind of milestones you want to get to, in what time frame? And sort of how do you tell that story to be able to raise as well? And I think a lot of the maybe underappreciated thing is how much YC is definitely the investor I've seen. It feels the most like they're really rooting for the founders.
All right.
So they're like, they invest, but they really behave as like, it's your company, it's your life. I'm here for advice. You can come and ask for advice, and I'm here as a sounding board, but like, you make your own decisions, right?
All right.
So for us, I remember during the batch having a lot of conversations with Aaron, who was pushing me in terms of like, but so why are you doing this? Why? Because yes, a little bit of it felt like you're starting with this crazy vision of something that is really long to build, where like it might take a while before you get to like that MVP and the validation you want to get. And are you ready to dedicate, that much time of your life and energy and all that? So it was sort of like going to the core as like why I was so freaking obsessed with that idea. But once you get that through, they're sort of like behind you, even if sometimes you can sound a bit crazy with what you're doing.
Oh, that's perfect. And so at what point did you know that email, let's say, and not chat was the real place you wanted to innovate?
Yeah. So maybe some context on why I was doing this. So I was in the US. I worked at Asana for a while. At Asana, I discovered sort of like a new way of communicating with each other, where like instead of using chat for everything, these days everybody's in Slack or Teams and there's chatting at work. We used our own product, but in a very hacky way, like using Asana as a project management tool, and we used it more like a messaging system.
Yeah.
And it made us incredibly productive, incredibly efficient. Like I got there and, after a few weeks, I was like, wow, this is like a fucking insane way of working, And I felt that for the years that I was over there, is like, we are so efficient. And also thanks for this way of working and tool. And then when I joined Algolia, Algolia is like an amazing company, amazing trajectory, amazing talent, amazing product. And I loved my time over there. But the one thing that pained me every single day and night was that we did everything in Slack.
No.
All day long. So we had half the company in SF, half the company in Paris. I'd wake up 5,400 channels, question from the CMO in direct messages. Louis, question about product X and Y. I want to add the PMs for X and Y. I can't do it. I start a new channel. The information gets lost, blah, 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 And I started looking around. I was like, every company in the world seems to be working this way now, chat.
Yeah.
And then, 8 people out of 10 will tell you it's terrible. and it's generating anxiety, and they're
Yeah.
losing information, and they can't find stuff. And where did we make that decision?
True.
And that decision cost us like 37K
Mm-hmm.
because we forgot, we missed the deadline. It wasn't a thread, and
Yeah.
we didn't see it in the channel. And so having lived in a different world, you know, it's like, I feel like we fucking solved this problem.
Yeah.
And seeing everybody complain about it, I was like, you know, I know there is a way that this problem gets fixed. And I started looking around. I was like, Asana is not the only one. You know, Stripe figured out a way to solve this problem for themselves. You know, Alan figured out a way to solve this problem for themselves. GitLab, you know. So you find these companies that have this reputation for executing incredibly well. And they all are doing something a bit different than just chat.
Yeah.
But there is no product that really helps you do that easily. All these companies, they have like a crazy founder, like visionary founder, who's like, no, that's the way we're gonna do work here. For transparency, for structure, for decision making, right? But 99% of founders and leaders, they just don't even think about the problem, right? So, so the whole thing, and sorry, that's a lengthy answer, is like, how do you bring this way of working to people?
Yeah.
Part of it is behavior change and culture, but a lot of it is the tool, because, you know, the way the tools are designed really shape our behaviors, you know, the defaults of the tools and the primitives in there. And so Slack is there. Slack is really hard to displace, and Slack is actually really good at a whole lot of things. You know, real-time communication, really good at creating social tissue within a company, connection between people, especially with people being more distributed, remote, hybrid. But email hasn't been touched, and email has this. Email as a primitive is already threaded, which is really good for communication and decision making. Already has that concept of an inbox, which really helps you get organized and that you control, and messages are not going to go away just because you've read them, you know, on the phone. And email is in everybody's product set. You know, the two inboxes that people check every day is like, you got your chat, it might be Slack, it might be Teams, and you've got your emails, right? And for decades and decades, people have said email is going to go away and die, but like, no, email is like
still there.
De facto, it's like it's the protocol for business communication, right? And so, you know, rather than try to like create a new product that would be like another inbox, it's like, you got your emails, you got your Slack, and come use my new things. Like, nobody wants that. Right. The thing for us was like, we can use email, but email has got all of these flaws from the get-goes, you know, and that, you know, the protocol is old, the threading can be horrible, it's not transparent, you lose information as, you know, as soon as someone leaves the company. But these are all tech problems, you know, and design problems. And those are things we could fix. And so the whole thing's like, yes, we're building an email client, but the vision behind it is much bigger. It's not just like, oh, I want a fancier version of Gmail. You know, it's like, how do we actually help people collaborate together more efficiently? And email is the wedge that allows us to get distribution at scale.
Yeah, but it's funny you'd mentioned that. We talked about that before, but I've been using it, and I think you're doing a great job. I really like your mission statement that you changed a while back on LinkedIn, which is to making email fun again. And that's true, because it's something I dread. I have several different addresses that I use, like a personal one for my freelance gig, another one for the podcast. You know, there's a bunch of different ones, and I'm always late when it comes to that, because thanks to automation, I'm able to, you know, tag everything, sort of like get some things out of it. But I've been building this. What you mentioned, all the companies that have figured this out, they usually have like either like their own tools or something, their processes, or, you know, their mindset has to change to deal with that pain. And you're the only ones who offer like off the shelf, you know, something that's already ready and you can just plug it in and it works. And it's been honestly pretty efficient on my end. And And we were talking about this yesterday with another guest who talks about product delights. And this one was one thing that really struck me, that mission statement. I'm hyped when I use Upstream. I actually want to look at my email, and honestly, I never thought I'd say this, but it does a really great job. And for that, there are some things that are still missing. But again, as you said, like you have to build everything because you can't rebuild everything that Gmail's done in 10 plus years, just like this. But you're doing a great job, and pretty hyped with the way you're building things.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is like music to my ears. The way we think about building products is we focus a lot on sort of like what emotions we want people to feel when using the product and how we drive towards, those emotions. And so sort of like you saying of like, oh, I'm actually having fun in my inbox, in my emails and enjoying it is actually the type of stuff that we're driving towards with our designer.
That's honestly, you're doing a great job. And so to get back on the crafting side, I remember that you wrote, I remember one post that you posted on LinkedIn where you said that MVPs, takes millions and years to build, and that's okay. And why do you think so many founders like misunderstand that notion of MVP?
Well, I think it's been way overused, and MVP means a different thing, in the mouth of different people. For some people, it's become an excuse to be like, oh, I'll just be sloppy with my work and just ship something, But I think if you read the Lean Startup and if you really put it back in context, it's like a tool. It's driving with hypothesis, what you want to test and validate, and what helps you get there, And hypothesis can be at multiple levels, and sometimes you can do stuff that is very lean. Like I'm thinking of a concrete example. When I was at Asana, for instance, pretty late in the game, we were at maybe 30, 40 million ARR or something. I mean, late in the game. It seems early, thinking back now. But we had this thing that a lot of people were struggling to understand the product and get around the product. And one hypothesis that I had was that if we redesign the product in some fashion, at least, the landing area and sort of like the main navigation areas, we could be a ton better, right? And so you can think of the MVP in that context, right? So you got a product that's, dozens of millions in ARR that people are relying on day in, day out. And you could think, oh, I'm going to test it with mockups.
Yeah.
But when you try, you realize it doesn't land because it's not people's data in there. Because what you want to test is like, you've got a team leader who's inviting someone to collaborate on like the next marketing launch. And that's a project in Asana. And so the new user that's coming in, do they get what this product is for? Do they recognize that there's the marketing launch and everything? So the context and the data really helps with it, right? If I just have a mockup and the project is not something that's related to you and you don't see your boss's avatar in there, you can't validate the hypothesis, right? But if I try to rebuild Asana with a different design, then it might take me 4 years, And so, for instance, one thing really cheap that we did is like we hacked the CSS of our own product with just like a browser extension. So we got an engineer who built a browser extension who would take over CSS and like move stuff around the actual product. And yes, a lot of things would break, but then we would hijack new users when they signed up and be like, oh, you're about to sign up. Don't sign up right now. Jump on a call with us and share your screen and we're going to watch you, right?
Okay.
And then put that new sort of like just install this extension before. And so they have a different first impression of Asana, right? Which like, yes, if you go more than 3 clicks, everything's going to break around. But you can actually, qualitatively, you can sense whether you're making a difference, whether you're confused as hell, still trying to figure out what the projects are, that kind of stuff. That took us like a day or like a day and a half to sort of like build that, right?
Yeah.
So I think of that as an MVP, as a way as like you've got a hypothesis and you can validate it. But the MVP is different, it's very different based on, sometimes just mockups is good enough. Sometimes you need a full working product, and it depends on the scale of your hypothesis as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was Zappos where he would, or even Amazon. I think,
he would ship the shoes. Yeah, I think he
Yeah.
put up a website with shoes.
and he didn't have them. It's
He didn't have them.
Amazon was the same thing. I think there was like a bookstore nearby, and he would just like take pictures and put them online.
Yeah.
And then once people would actually buy it, he would go buy and send.
Yeah.
But
That's
was
perfect.
it. That was it. And
Yeah.
then now Amazon is just like logistics, like they became the logistics themselves.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
It's kind of like ignoring the V in MVP. Yes, you want something minimal as possible, but it needs to be viable. If your stuff wasn't viable and you test and you're like, oh, this doesn't work. You're like, yeah, but maybe your stuff, wasn't big enough to validate your hypothesis.
And so how do you personally decide when to perfect the craft versus shipping something scrappy?
Yeah, so when you say perfect the craft, what I hear is sort of like, make sure that the details are right, that the experience feels good, that, you might sweat the details of pixels in the product and animations and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For that, I think I kind of think of it as a false trade-off. I think of it as like, this is the bar for the product, and we always build this way.
Yeah.
And whatever we ship with this bar in mind. Because if you're constantly thinking, oh, I'll polish the product later and I'll test it, then like you'll never get to it. Like it's never big enough in a way. And it really depends. I mean, some products need it, some products don't need it as well. So if you put it in perspective, like my very first company, we were selling enterprise, big contracts to marketing teams at big fashion retail companies. And you want a product that's usable, but the buyer is not buying based on UX or how the product feels, right? You're selling like a $500,000 contract, and like, is it doing the job and all that? And yes, you need the marketing team to be able to use it and get value out of it. So if it's too shitty, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
But it's very different if, say, you're selling Notion.
Yeah.
Like, go ask the founders of Notion this question. It's like, when do you perfect the craft or not? It's like Notion without the craft.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist. Wouldn't have existed. Yeah. It's like we had Google Docs. It was perfectly fine, right? So I guess another way to frame it back to the MVP question is like, for the type of product that I'm building and the vision that I'm selling to you, having a product that people just freaking love spending their day in is just baseline.
Yeah.
If I'm here, you're going to switch the place where you do your emails, but I'm building a product you don't love being in, then, my assumption is it's not going to work, right? And so, it's almost like having a really high bar for craft and having a product that people really love and sweating the details of every single piece of the product is part of my MVP to test that hypothesis,
Yeah, we're back to the emotional side.
Yeah.
Honestly, Nesreen that wrote about product delight that I had yesterday, she's going to love this part because that's her thesis. Yeah. Like that emotional connection that drives so much more, that drives ambassadors afterwards. And then, that's where you get to PLG, I guess, in the end. Yeah.
And if you're intentional about all that, you build the company around that, and you build your team around that. So, our first hire was like a full-time product designer, right? And we're lucky enough to have someone who's just a magician with everything design, who really thinks this way. He was a designer at Superhuman before, who was also in the email space, different type of vibe for emails, but still a very high bar for intentionality and craft. And it's easy to talk about it. sometimes talk to a lot of founders who are like, your product is like so well built and so fast and you know, so enjoyable to use. How do you get there? I was like, I've got like, you know, my first employees, like full-time salary, sort of like exclusively working on that.
Yeah.
Are you ready to do that? You know?
Yeah.
And but also because for me, it is strategic for, you know, the market that I'm going after. And for you, as much as you would love to have a product like that, it might not be as important as getting your first AE in the company.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you're talking about the team because that's one point that I want to focus on. So you're building a Paris-based team.
Yeah.
But with strong US ties.
Yeah.
So we often hear that French engineers, you know, focus on code perfection, and US engineers focus on shipping. So have you had to like...
Is that what we say?
Yeah, that people say that a lot. I can see you don't agree. Body language. But did you... Yeah. But did you had to unteach any bad habits, or what do you think about that? Like, how do you get all of this to work? Because we've had this discussion. It's interesting how many French people, you know, move to the US. You choose to do the opposite. So I find this.
Yeah. So in terms of the team, so we're based in France and everybody working, you know, in person in the office in Paris, but we're very international. So like our first 2 employees are not French. And it's almost hard for me to answer the question because, you know, my engineers are not necessarily, I've got some French engineers and I've got some non-French engineers. And I guess I'm old enough that I've seen, you know, engineers focus too much on perfection and engineers, you know, too scrappy, shipping too fast. I've seen them both on both sides of the Atlantic. You know, I've worked in SF with scrappy engineers and I've worked in Paris with
Algolia.
Yeah, Algolia. I was based in the engineering team was based in Paris, and I was as well. So I've seen both sides. In France, our education and the way we're brought up really teaches us to shoot for perfection.
Yeah.
So we're very good at rationalizing things, you know, going into nuance, thinking about what's the exact right decision.
Yeah.
So we can spend a lot of time there. And French people tend to be extremely comfortable debating and disagreeing, you know, which like you find less of in the US, maybe, or like it's done in a different way, like maybe in a less direct way or a less confrontational way, but like the good teams still know how to do that. So I think the thing that I see, I kind of think of it as more of it's not a French versus American. We've got different ways of talking, different ways of communicating, and we're brought up differently. But my frame of thinking is more like junior versus senior engineer, you know? And so it's more like in the US, a junior engineer coming out of school, you know, doesn't realize how important it is to collaborate. That, you know, engineering at its core, it's a creative job, and professional software engineering is very different from what you learned at school.
Yeah.
It's like collaborating with others. It's building something together. It's a whole bunch of, you know, processes so that you can ship the product every 10 minutes, with like 100 people working on it, and maintain and create a code base that is understandable for everybody, that you're not breaking things across, that your colleagues are working on different teams. So it's a real team effort, and that's something that is learned.
Yeah.
And probably my frame of thinking here is just mechanically there are more people with more experience in the US than in France, because the tech ecosystem in Paris is much, much younger.
Yeah.
You know, it's really bloomed in the last 10, 15 years-ish, you know?
Yeah.
And so you have really strong engineers and also non-engineers, you know, other functions. But in the US, you'll find people who have done their whole career, who are like, you know, approaching retirement and have built, you know, tech products their whole life and seen how you scale a team working together. So I'm not as black and white on like French versus American, I think we have our specificities. I think we have our advantages and strengths with our education. But our education teaches us to learn quickly. French, and so there's so many French people in the US, in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I know.
Right? I mean, you're one of them.
Yeah.
They are so well respected, and they learn the ways of, how you work, in American companies very quickly, because we are taught to learn constantly.
Yeah. But it's true that you do have a lot of seniors, and I've had this debate actually at a lot of different companies where sometimes I don't like that word, senior, because there can be extremely young people that learn very quickly. Yeah. You can't beat time, so obviously I'm talking about like 5 years experience versus 15.
Yeah.
But some people, depending on the environment, you can learn quicker. And I do think that in the US, you have a lot of mentors to learn from, and that's how the learning curve, gets like steeper.
Yeah.
But it's true that when you do hire seniors and people that have the right mindset, you go quicker. I believe that hiring is the key to everything. If you're confident with your hires, and you can mess up, that happens. But if you're confident with the people you hire and you can trust them, then that's where autonomy works. I was discussing this with Thomas from Allen, and it's the same thing. He says,
good friend from the US.
Yeah, French that has been
went
in the
to
US.
Stanford together.
Yeah, but that's the same thing. He says, like, if you're confident with the people you hire, then afterwards you can leave so much autonomy that everyone can build a part of it like on their own, but then it makes sense. It makes sense. They follow the vision, they know what to do, they know what not to do. I think that's honestly the most important thing.
Yeah. I can't agree with that more.
And so how do you spot like these people, that 1% that you're looking for?
How you spot the 1%? So to me, it starts with being extremely clear with what you're looking for. And that will be different depending on your company and depending on your need, right? And so you think about like a specific role, like I think maybe if I think about Upstream and when we got started looking for the first few engineers and our designer, you think, okay, an engineer needs to have this skill set. And skill set includes, okay, maybe we want people who can be full stack, work on the back end, work on the front end. We need them to be at least a minimum level at architecture.
Yeah.
But it's also, can they collaborate easily? Can they express their ideas? Can they change their minds? Yeah. How do they get the best out of other people?
How'd you test that before hiring them?
Oh, so you sort of like, so for us, it's like we created a grid of like, this is what we're looking for. And like an engineer.
Yeah.
So part of it might be like, code quality. It might be, front end skills, architecture and all that. But part of it was also like humility, and that's a thing that we test company wide when we hire someone. Humility is one, ownership is another one. And then you create your interviews and your questions to go test for that. So an engineering interview at Upstream is as much an interview about your tech chops as about, your, interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
Because we really value that. And I've seen how much of a difference you can make when you have, strong engineers who can collaborate together, really well. You have people who are brilliant, but they will drag the team down because they can't get along with the rest, because they can't express their ideas, or because they'll get frustrated, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you design questions. You're like, okay, in my interview, I'm going to ask these questions. And I always ask the same. Every engineer goes through like the same questions. And then, we can go into detail, but it's like talking about past experiences. Have you had a situation like that? Yeah. How did you deal with it? Going in detail as much as possible and seeing how they dealt with stuff and what they've learned. Yeah.
Right. But it's super interesting because I do think that You've made some pretty fantastic hires, and it again, you feel in the product, you feel this attention to detail, for example. And that struck me when you were talking about scrappiness and all these things, because from what I feel and see, it 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 does feel like a lot is spent on attention to detail and making sure that it's actually pretty. It's like
Yeah.
the product's beautiful. It's not just functional. So
Yeah.
so it's funny. I haven't seen the earliest, like, obviously, versions of the product. So maybe the first ones were really, YC were pushing you. Oh, come on, get clients, even though it's not perfect. But at this point, right now, as of today, it looks good. It feels, as you said, really quick and snappy, and that makes a difference, because I remember I've discussed this. I don't remember. I think it was with Thomas maybe, but I'm a fan of Arc.
Yeah, I love it.
And my whole world was shattered when I learned that they were going to discontinue the whole thing. I was like, no. And I've been trying to find a replacement, and honestly, I found others that are good, but just not snappy, slow.
Yeah.
And my experience was just like, I mean, the design itself, the navigation was good, but just the fact of being slow, it pissed me off. Like, I churned very quickly, but at the same time, I really gave it a shot.
Yeah.
I stayed there. I was like, the thing is good, but at some points it gets frustrating. And I do feel that you give a lot of attention to detail on what you do. And I think that getting back to, like, hiring people, I think that, again, like, finding your designer, he's amazing. Like, I really see the difference, and that strategy about who to hire, I feel that it's the part that makes a difference.
And it's not only design, it's also, our engineers care so much about it, right? And so they'll work extra hours to make sure to sweat that extra detail, and they'll do stuff that's not in the mockups, that our designer didn't plan for, because, one of our engineers is like almost like half a designer, and so we have people who actually enjoy that, and we're all aligned in sort of like the level of quality and craft that we want to build into the product.
That's honestly, that's amazing. I remember there's one thing I wanted to focus on. You started the Salmon of the Week ritual. That made me laugh. What is it, and why do you think these rituals matters more than, like, values written in a document?
Yeah. So for context for listeners, we have a ritual at the office, which we call Salmon of the Week. And so salmons, for context, because they swim upstream. And so, the salmon's the official mascot.
Yeah.
And so the way it works is we have an actual plush salmon. And every week, the person who was the prior recipient of the plush salmon awards it to another person of their choice. And so basically, they will pick someone who have done extraordinary stuff, the week before, or has really helped them or something. And say a few words in front of the whole team around, why they picked that person, and reward them.
Yeah.
And then when you get the salmon, then you get to proudly sort of like have that plush salmon on your desk for the whole week. So it's sort of like a daily constant reminder of, the appreciation of the team for you, right? And I think culture, a lot of people think of culture as 5 values, words that you write on the wall and that you repeat. But to me, it's much more about what are the behaviors that we live every day, right? And so those small rituals, they really help create those behaviors and reinforce them, right? So that's a way that the team, what I love about it is that it's a way that we don't forget to celebrate the small wins on the way, because, it's a long journey, and there's
of course,
you're constantly focused on problems and trying to fix stuff. So it's a good enforcer of that. But it's also a ritual that's entirely driven by the team,
Yeah.
Like, my co-founder is not the one awarding, you're the employee of the week. It's like, no, it's like, your teammate who decides, you did something great and you helped me out. And I want you to feel proud for a week. Right.
Yeah.
And we also do, the fun thing we do is we also write it down. So every week when you award the Salmon, you write a few words down of why you awarded the Salmon to the person. Because like there is something about reading it that feels both very like someone took the time to write it.
It's another
very authentic.
dimension.
Yeah. And you can relive the moment of, over and over and over, because you can read it again. And so now we have sort of like a backlog of all those words written to each other on the team that you can go back. It's like, I got the Salmon, like it's my third time getting the Salmon, and that's what my teammates said that last time.
Yeah, those cultural details are always fun. And I think culture plays a whole role, obviously.
That is a practice to be fair. I give credit to Asana. We had a sort of like a similar practice over there that largely inspired the way we do things.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And so I'd like to maybe a little bit focus on the product itself. And like as of late, it's got features like auto drafts, summaries, all these things. When you dig into AI, like if I use AI to write an email or AI to summarize it, what are we just building bots, or how do you maintain sort of like the human value in that loop?
Yeah. So context for the listeners: Upstream is an email client that feels human and fun to use, and it writes your emails for you. It does it exactly in the way that you would write them, so that then you can fly through your inbox in a way that's much more enjoyable and much more fun to you. And so we do that thanks to a lot of AI LLMs working left and right. But sort of like a design principle that we have is that the AI should always be working for you, which means it shouldn't be taking control over what you do. So for instance, it doesn't send the emails, without your approval. So you always sort of like get to review what it does. And it should actually help you save time in that, if the AI writes something for me, but it doesn't quite sound like me, and then I gotta go and edit, 2/3 of it and rewrite this thing and do it over and over again, I might feel like I'm saving time, but I'm actually sort of like wasting time, right? So we've really honed in on the details, like how, you, Cedric, as you write emails, you probably do them differently from the way I do them, And when you write to, a customer, you might write differently than when you write to an investor or like a podcast host, right? And sometimes you're more formal, sometimes you're more informal, sometimes you want to be more like, a really good negotiator, and have a firm stance. And sometimes you want people to feel really good on the other side. And so we've really honed in on like, how do we get that right? Not only your own voice, but also your voice when you talk to Mary, which is different than when you
the
talk
context.
to Lucy.
Yeah.
And the context as well, right? And the third thing is you also don't have time to geek this out, right? And so all of that should be almost transparent to you.
Yeah.
So today you sign up for Upstream, we scan your inbox, we identify which emails you're going to want to reply to, and we create a draft for you, and they're ready for you to use, right? And it's not like you had to think about, how am I going to set this up? When is it going to create a draft? How is it going to write? We give you full control. So if you want to go in there, you want to edit the prompt, you want to change how you speak to investors, you want to add your Calendly link or something, you can do it. But by default, you get there and the AI is working for you. It's not asking you to do work. It's like people don't have the skills and they don't have time to really try and figure this out.
No, that makes sense. And so we're seeing a trend of, invisible apps where the interface basically disappears. So I know you talked about, the fact that we said email was going to die. It hasn't until now. But do you think the email, like the client, the UI, it will still exist in 5 years? Or will it be just an agent, managing the whole thing? Like, why would you go now especially with all these things that are happening.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, whoever thinks, like the interface, the inbox is going to go away is like completely crazy, right? I think the inbox is going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
The feel of it might evolve. But I think one thing that's largely underestimated is people bring a ton of value to work, and AI is really good to help them do their work.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you really maximize the value if people are in control, right?
Yeah.
And so working with familiar interfaces is really key, because those interfaces are the way that people know how to be in control, right? So if I take away your inbox and I'm like, okay, I'm going to manage work for you, it's like, how do you feel? It's like, okay, like you completely trust this thing, right? And over time, we might take more and more of your inbox, on, in that, maybe 50% of the emails you receive today are going to be automatically, archived out of the web for you or triaged in a specific place. And like, okay, these are all the emails about, prospects that you want to follow up with. And they're in the same place, and I've prepared a draft. And maybe some of them I've even followed up for you because you've given me permission before. But I think the core paradigm of the inbox, is still the way that you control everything, right? We just make it so that the inbox doesn't feel overwhelming anymore, that it's, much calmer, that you get there, you can just, fly, the important stuff is there, you can just, fly through the important stuff, get to the non-important stuff later, or like the inbox did it for you. But the best products today are the ones who understand that you're really here to augment people, and you really have to fit into their workflow rather than asking them to change entirely the way that they do things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the story of my life. I'm always late when it comes to emails, and I spend so much time, with external solutions and building things with flows, N8N that just goes and labels everything and sort of like tries to understand what's important, what's not important. I have to say that I do this because it saves me time. But again, like what I'm pretty hyped about with Upstream is if you guys do that for me, that's some time that I don't have to spend building and thinking about the whole process and thinking about all my needs. It just like, gets it pretty quickly. Yeah. And the fact of me building these things is because I'm conscious of how much time I lose when it gets to this. And again, it's not fun. So for me, at least, of course, I'm not the only one, but you're hitting something right, because it definitely resonates, at this point.
Yeah. I mean, look at Cursor, right? Cursor is like, the question is like, is the inbox going to go away?
Yeah.
It's like saying, oh, is the IDE going to go away for engineers?
Yeah.
Like, no, like, Cursor is just based on VS Code. Yeah. And then it's like augmented to help you be much more efficient.
But it doesn't replace.
Yeah.
It's.
But the IDE is still going to be there, and the shape of it is going to evolve. And, the more, we abstract away code and talk in natural language to the machine, the more the IDE is going to adapt to that. But there's always going to be that kind of interface. It's not like the engineer is going to have, like a voice control in their pocket and be like, oh, like code this for me, while like being on the subway.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's definitely true. And honestly, I've like the latest client I've been working for, we brought Cursor, and just the time it saved us is insane. And even developers that like they weren't afraid at all that it would replace them. They were super hyped about not losing time with the basics and stuff that's boring as heck, and focus on the real problems actually, rather than all those little things that you have to do, but that is being automated by Cursor.
Yeah, we see it every day at the office. Our engineers focus a lot more on like, what's the tech spec, what's the architecture, what is the plan, how do we build this in the way that it works well across the product, and it keeps everything, secure and stable and fast, and a lot less time spent on like the grunt work of like actually making it work. Once you have, as an engineer, you have the thing in your head and you need to go code and execute it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like taking that part away. And so same with the inbox, you know, you think about like, what's the important stuff? I want to spend, you know, time on those 3 messages. I don't want to spend too much time on those. These should be taken care of. And so it's like augmenting you, and you actually spend your own time where you provide the most value, right?
Yeah.
But it's not like the inbox is replacing you.
No, agreed. I think honestly, those are pretty crazy insights. I'm super happy. Maybe just to close this up, a couple rapid fire questions. For you.
Go for it.
So inbox 0, myth or an actual thing?
It depends on people. It depends. It's an actual thing for people. I'm an inbox like 25 person, whereas like, you know, I've got sort of like, I archive everything and I always maintain it in a state where like I know there's like stuff that needs my attention. And we've got people in the office that have full inbox 0, and we've got people in the office who don't work like that at all. Right?
Yeah.
But we've built a product in a way that, you know, whichever flow works for you, the product works for you.
Awesome. One tool, if you had to delete one forever, Slack or Zoom?
Slack.
That was easy.
I don't use Slack.
Remote work, because you talked about everyone, you know, being in Paris in the office. Do you believe in 100% remote or always hybrid?
We don't do remote because that's not the way that we want to work. That's not the company that we want to build. And we believe that we get so many benefits from being in person. So remote's not my thing, you know. And so if your question is like remote versus in office, I'm like in office. Right?
Yeah.
Now I know it works for some people and some companies, right? If you really create your company around that, there are ways that you overcome the challenges of not being in person, and you know, you compensate. You have other advantages in being remote, right? But that is definitely not what we're doing.
All right. Let's say best feature. What's the one feature in Upstream that you're the most proud of, but maybe users rarely notice, or something that, you know, you haven't seen people tick on?
Okay. So I was gonna answer, you know, the AI draft replies, which is the thing that people love, which is, you know, you get to your inbox, everything's written in your own voice. That's like the most proud of. But this is the one that everybody uses. So
and it wasn't the core thing when I met you, though.
Yeah.
It wasn't the core
It's a brand
thing.
new thing.
Yeah, and you did it, and it worked, and it's working better and better. It's getting better, and I guess adoption grows from that.
I think the one thing that we've really gotten right, and not every user figures it out, is all of the shortcuts that help you fly through the inbox, right? And so like if you're an inbox 0 person, you know, just archiving all of the messages, you know, within a specific, you know, split of the inbox that you have, being able to navigate from one place to the other very quickly without touching the mouse. If you just learn 5 or 6 shortcuts, you can really feel like almost like you're playing a game with your emails, right? And so I see the users who take the time to figure this out really, really love the product. So that's one thing I'm proud of. And I know our engineers and our designers spend a lot of time, you know, getting this right so that you can always be on the keyboard. So that might be one that's undervalued, underappreciated by some users.
Yeah, because I think it's something you have to get used to, like actually using these shortcuts, because it's not the way we've operated until now. So you have to educate yourself into playing a game, basically.
You know, so now when I onboard new people, I teach them about sort of like the 5 or 6 that they need to know, and you know, and like just being able to like go up, down in your inbox, open emails, answer them, archive them, you know, move between different inboxes, you know.
Yeah.
Just with that, like 95% of the time, you don't need to reach to the mouse.
Yeah, true. And maybe one last thing. I always ask about books. I don't know if you're a book reader at all or not, but what's the book you gift most often, or you'd recommend to anyone? Doesn't have to be product, though.
Doesn't have to be product. That's a good question. I mean, I can think. I mean, there's like the typical product books that I love, that I think every PM should read. Like, you know, Inspired, Martin Kagan, obviously, Crossing the Chasm. I think one that's underappreciated. I know you have a lot of PM listeners. My former boss at Asana, Jackie Bavaro, she was the famous author of Cracking the PM Interview that everybody buys when you're trying to get a PM interview. So everybody knows this one. But she wrote another one that is less well known that is called Cracking the PM Career. And it's not a book you sort of like read end to end. It's like super thick, you know, it's like, I don't know, 400, 500, 600 pages. But it's full of so many insights and best practices in terms of how do you grow as a PM? How do you deal with that situation versus that one? And she's got really exhaustive in terms of how to deal with different things, how to think about your career, help your job at the same time. So I think that's one that's for PMs, at least, you know, a bit more under the radar. But that I think, you know, every person wanting to build a career in PM could benefit from.
So you can sort of cherry pick from what you need.
Definitely. There's stuff about, you know, making a team work well together, frameworks, how to think about strategy, execution, you know, so many gems.
I confess I haven't read it.
So
that's definitely Amazon tonight. Hello. All right, thank you so much, man. This has been packed with really wonderful insights. Thank you so much. I'll put all your links in the video, obviously, where people can follow you. And again, like I'm definitely biased, so I urge people to, you know, when Upstream comes out, test it out by themselves, and get their own opinion. But I've been super hyped with it, and for people for whom, you know, email is a pain. Like, you've done a wonderful job so far, so I can't wait to see what you got cooking next.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess maybe by the time this episode comes out, Upstream will be public. So if you want to try it out, you go to upstream.do. It's like upstream.do, and you can sign up, and it takes 2 minutes. And if you're still not using AI in your emails, you know, in 2026, you're missing out.
All right. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What stayed with me here is that a lot of modern work creates noise by default, and we rarely stop to question it. That's why I really like this conversation. It's a reminder of better ways of working and that they're possible. That actually, you know, AI should help us focus on what really matters. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more conversations like this. As always, thank you so much for listening.